How many of you have still not gone on a vacation this summer? I would love to hear a collective ah for all those people. Put your hands back up. Feel the ahs around you. Yeah, yeah. You know, we're in this new series talking about time and about a very important concept about time. And the concept is simply this, that God calls us to think differently, think about time differently. You know, most of us just think about time as, 24 hours a day, 60 minutes in an hour, some days in a week, and time just kind of flies by, and I don't have enough time. Most of us would say, I don't have enough time, right? And so we kind of get caught up in it, and we talked about it last week. We all get caught up in this idea of, I just wish I had more time in the day, right? And what we discovered last week, and what I hope you'll discover today and over the course of the next couple of weeks as we talk about time, is that the answer to that question of, you think the question is, I need more, or the answer is, I need more time, when the reality is not that. It's about what you do with the time you have. And so today, I'm going to make all of you that are parents feel terrible. You're welcome. Especially if you have younger kids. If you have older kids, it's too late to make you feel terrible because you probably already feel terrible or really happy, one of those two. That's kind of where you typically fall down. But we really have to kind of take a moment. And one of the reasons to make you feel terrible is that sometimes we need to feel terrible in order to be open to new ways of doing things, new ways of looking at things. And this idea that God calls us to think about time differently is based on this passage we looked at last week, Proverbs chapter 19, verse 12, which simply says, teach us to number each of our days so that we may grow in wisdom. And if somehow we can begin to number each of our days, begin to see each day as valuable, in a sense, each day is sacred. Because the reality is, yesterday is gone, and that yesterday will never come back again. This last week, gone. And all of us think, oh, well, one of these days I'm going to get time to do something. And you discover at some point that those times are gone. In fact, let me do a little thing to kind of give you parents just a little clue, and those that may one day be parents. If you have a child at some point, this is how much time you get with them. From 0 to 18 years of age, you will have 6,570 days. Now, that sounds like quite a bit of time, right? But let's break it down. How many weeks does that mean? 936 weeks, which is really 216 months. So by the time your child starts kindergarten, a third of that's already gone. By the time they get to high school, 2/3 of that's already gone. In fact, I did a little quick math here because that'll be helpful. Age 10. If your child is age 10, this is how much time you have left them. 2,920 days. This is how many weeks you have. 416 weeks. 96 months left. I mean, that's like some of our car loans anymore, isn't it? And I'm convinced one of the best things you can do if you're a parent, for yourself and for your kids, is to begin to think differently about the time that you have with them. Because you will hear, somebody will probably come up to you and say things like this. Oh, treasure these moments because time goes fast, right? Before you know it, they'll be up out of the house, right? Anybody ever hear those kind of things, right? And if you've heard them at a wrong time, you've thought, treasure these times. I'm just trying to survive these times, right? Or to say to be out of the house before you know it, and sometimes you get to those teenage years and you're thinking, Jesus, please make it soon, right? Now, we may never say that. I hope you don't say that out loud to your kids, but we think those kinds of things, right? But what if this whole parenting thing is not simply about surviving those times, but about making the most of those times? And about recognizing the full weight of that responsibility that you have as a parent, or that you have as a grandparent, or that you have as an aunt or uncle, to recognize just the importance of all these days. Because here's the question we're going to start with. When will you have more time than now? And we think in our minds, well, next week or in a couple of months, once I get done with this project right, once I get the basement finished, once I get this done, once I get through all the schooling I got to do to get that job, when I get to that, we all tell ourselves, when will I have enough more time than now? We think at this point, and here's the true answer. Because you are not going to have any more time than you did this week. Because every week has 168 hours in it. Is that right, Marty? Is that the math? Yes. Got an A for math today, kids. See how you do that? You study beforehand. But every week has 160 hours. No week has more, no week has less. Now, they may feel like you have more or less, but none of them do. And how you use the time you have makes all the difference in the time you have. Think about that for a second. How you use the time you have makes all the difference in the time you have. So I hope you're glad to be at church today because I'm going to make you feel bad. Everybody say yay. Yeah. Well, let's pray because we're going to need it today, all right? Father, today we just ask for you to be not just present in this place, but present in our lives. And I want to stop and pray for those parents that are in this room today and watching online today that are just overwhelmed by this thing we call parenting. I pray especially for those that feel like they're parenting by themselves, maybe those that are parenting by themselves, who feel like there just is not enough time. And Father, I just ask that something that gets said today would do something good in their lives, that it would give them hope, that it would give them a plan, that it really would make these times with their kids the best of times. And for those of us that no longer have kids at home or have never had kids at home or don't ever plan to have kids at home, I pray today would just help us to be more sensitive, more supportive, and more encouraging to those voices we hear around us in this room today, to the kids we see running around the halls later today, for the kids that are part of our lives, in our neighborhoods and in our families. And so, Lord, we invite you into this space and place to do what you always do, and that is work on our lives. In your name, amen. There's a passage that we oftentimes put up when we do our family dedications, and we're going to have one next week. And in a family dedication, it's this idea of we're dedicating the whole family, not just the baby, but the family to God. And there's this verse that we throw up to remind parents of that importance, that this is about not just simply raising a kid, but there's this spiritual aspect, this faith aspect to it, found over in Deuteronomy chapter 11. This is from the Message paraphrase, where Moses looks at the group of people and says, listen, place these words on your hearts. Get them deep inside of you. Because Moses recognizes the thing that's so important for all of us, that these just can't be words out here, that they have to become words in here. And he says, teach them to your children. Teach them to your children. Talk about them wherever you are, sitting at home or walking in the street. Talk about them from the time you get up in the morning until you fall into bed at night. Inscribe them on the doorpost and gates of your cities so that you'll live a long time and your children with you. And sometimes the weight of that responsibility of raising not just kids to be good citizens, not just to get good grades, not just to get a good job, but raising them to have faith can seem overwhelming at times. Because if you're a parent, you have probably discovered that you cannot force a toddler to share. You can't compel your child to have faith. You can't even make your teenager make smart decisions. But what you can do, and what you must do, is love them, and teach them, and to guide them, and to pray for them, and to care for them, and to hope for them. Because here's the thing I'm convinced of. Don't let the hectic pace of normalcy cause you to miss the important. Because all of us can get caught up in that whole pace of normalcy, that drift that just happens. And life just seems to pass you by. And I can guarantee you, those of you that are young parents, I can guarantee you there are people in this room today that would do anything they could, if they could, to go back and have a redo with their kids. There are some people today that have terrible relationships with their kids because they weren't there. They weren't there when the kids needed them most. And if they could say anything to you, they would say, listen, enjoy these times. Value these times. Because this pace of normalcy, this hectic pace, can really cause you to miss the important. And you get caught up in the urgent, caught up in the demanding, caught up in paying the bills, caught up in fixing the car, caught up in going this place, caught up in going there. And you can get so caught up that you miss it all. So, I'm going to do a little therapy session for myself today. Because I've told people before, I had the best parenting advice before I had kids, and after my kids left home. But during those wonderful years that both my boys were home, it was not a good time to ask me, because I had opinions, but in the real world of making those things work out, things don't always quite work out today. So I brought somebody, a special guest today, to help me kind of do some counseling, some opening up of my life. I want you to welcome my youngest son, Ben. How you doing?
I'm okay.
All right, good. I'm going to move this down a little bit.
Thanks.
All right, you're welcome. So tell everybody, how many different places have you lived?
I haven't counted. Truckee. I was born in Truckee, California.
How many of you know where Truckee, California is at? How many of you know where Lake Tahoe, California is at? Yeah, it's right close by. All right.
Then we moved to Georgia, then up here briefly, and then Colorado Springs, then back to California, to cool California, which you don't need to ask how many people. It's near Sacramento, California, which is the capital.
Greatest place to live in California, a place called cool.
See, after that, well, you guys moved up to Washington State when I started college at PUC. So I went up there to visit during the summers and that sort of thing. And then while I was at college, I went and spent a year in Austria studying German. And then a couple years later, I went to Thailand for a year to teach English. And then now I moved out here. So I didn't count. I wasn't counting. I was making it look like I was counting, but I wasn't.
Oh, okay. That was a lot of places. How did you feel about it? Were you glad that you got to live in lots of places, or did you wish you could have been in one place?
No, I loved it. I loved moving around, and I think it caught on with me. I kind of got a bug. I noticed it first when I was at PUC.
PUC, for those that aren't.
Pacific Union College, where I went to school and then worked briefly afterwards. So while I was there, I kind of caught this bug where if I was there for 2 years, I felt like, okay, I need to go do something else for a little while. So I ended up taking the 6-year plan for the 4-year degree, which worked out for me, but I got that bug. I liked moving around.
It worked out for us as well, because those 2 years when he was other countries, it was a lot cheaper to have him in college.
That's
so
true. And you guys came out and visited me.
And we came out and visited. It was
so.
Good for everybody.
Yeah, it was perfect.
So tell me some of your memories growing up. What are some things that kind of stick out from the places we've lived?
This isn't so much a thing from the places we lived, but we would always travel. Every summer we'd go out to California to visit family, no matter where we were. And I just always remember we would drive pretty much every time. And
we couldn't afford to fly.
Couldn't afford to fly, and you're cheap, so it worked out really well.
Frugal,
thrifty.
Cost conscious, those kind of things.
So we would always.
We'll cut that from the tape later. It's all good.
We would always drive out, and I've only made one cross-country trip with my wife. She and I moved out here from California, and it took us like 4 days. And we had 2 cats in the car, and it was miserable. The cats hated each other, and I think there's a lot of similarities with our trips to California. But the thing
Hey,
about
you better explain who hated each other in that trip.
it's my brother and me in the back. We sat in the back much like our cats did.
Did you tell your cats to stay on their side of the seat?
Yeah, they don't listen.
They don't
Good.
listen.
But what struck me as I was driving across, I was just thinking about all the trips that we made as kids and how miserable it was for us to drive across the country. Like, we enjoyed parts of it, but other parts it's just flat through these terrible flyover states. And when we were kids, I never got the impression from you and Mom that you weren't enjoying the time or that it was somehow a burden for you.
That's called good parenting.
That's called good parenting. It's good acting.
Yeah, good acting, yes.
But it always struck me that we must have been such a handful and such a terrible burden. It's just awful.
You would not believe this.
We must have been such a pain to deal with on those trips, but I never got the impression from you guys at all that you would have rather just skipped the trip and just had it be over with. I always got the impression that you guys were enjoying it as much as we were enjoying it. So, I don't know. I thought that was...
Okay. When you think back, because we talked earlier in the week, and I don't know what Ben's going to answer in any of these questions, but we talked just briefly about kind of the concept of what I was going to do today. So tell me, when you kind of think back to your childhood, and if you have kids at some point, what are some of the things that you had in your home growing up that you want to have in your home with your kids?
It's as a kid, you don't realize when something is the way it should be or something isn't the way it should be. You're limited by your own perspective. So I don't know what other kids had and what other kids didn't have, but I appreciated, and I was maybe too young to be able to say I appreciated it, but I know that when I was born, Mom quit her job and she stayed home and stayed with Aaron and I until we got old enough to go to school and she got back to work. And I know that was a big sacrifice to go on one income for a family of four, but I think that the relationship we developed with her from that and just being able to be around our mom all the time and being able to see you in the evenings, that was such an important thing. And yeah, just I hope that someday I'm able to be as present for my kids as my perception was that you guys were present for us when we were kids.
Okay. So, yeah. So let's flip the thing. Anything you kind of regret, or anything that you look at what your mom did or what I did that wasn't so good?
Mom was great.
That's good. Go ahead.
It's tough being a pastor's kid because he had so many things that he had to do, and I mean, there would be some weeks it'd be every night you had a meeting or something that you were involved in, and so a lot of times, I mean, you'd usually pick us up from school, but we maybe wouldn't even see you before we went to bed at night, and that was I know when we were younger, it wasn't that you weren't around, it's just that was kind of what we just knew, that at night you had other things that you had to do. You had board meetings and committees and all sorts of stuff, and I didn't like those things, but I didn't hold that against you because I just knew you had to be there. One thing that I really liked that came out of that is as we got a little bit older, when we were living in Colorado, and I don't know if you remember this, but you started clearing your schedule on Thursdays, and Thursday was like your night. We would switch off between Aaron and me, and it would be like, tonight I'm just hanging out with you. We're going to do whatever you want to do. And that was just like, oh man, we looked forward to that so much that it was just, okay, well, what do you want to do? And we'd be like, oh, well, let's go get milkshakes. Let's go to Baskin-Robbins. Let's go mini golfing. And I remember...
I remember us doing this one time. We went to Chipotle's. Everybody been to Chipotle's at some point? You know, they got those really small burritos. And we were there sometime, and Ben said he was really hungry, and he was going to get two, and I thought, I'm not buying you a second burrito, you're just going to take a couple bites. So we had a bet, right?
Yeah, first bet I ever won against you.
The bet was, I said, I'll get you another one, but if you don't eat it, you got to pay me back. So it was like $5.
It was a $5 bet. Yeah. He never made bets with us that he would lose. He cheated in that. He was the house.
I was smart. But he went and ate both. He ate 2 burritos. Can you believe that? Sorry, go ahead. Anything else?
Well, I appreciated the Thursday nights, even when we do things like one thing I wanted to do with you was make model cars, because you had all those model car parts, and I think that must have just been torture for you, because I wasn't good at it, and I didn't really want to complete the car. I just wanted to say I made a car with my dad, and it was just a dumb thing like that. I don't know. But that, I remember the Thursday nights, but that was, I think, and like I said, as my perspective at that time, I didn't think that anything was necessarily wrong, but I know you probably wish that you could have been there, and I think that it was probably as tough on you as it was on us, the fact that you weren't there. You had to go to meetings and you had other responsibilities, and it would have been nice to spend more time with you in that regard. One thing that I really liked that you guys did, and I should have said this earlier when it was the things that were good, but you guys would read to us. Mom would read to us almost every night before we went to bed, and the nights that you were home, you would read to us, and I really liked that because you would do voices for the characters, and Mom didn't do that. But she had consistency on her side. But from your perspective, what do you wish that you had done, or do you have any regrets about the way that you raised us?
You know, probably my biggest regrets was early on when you guys were real small, was I stayed really busy and just kind of forced myself to kind of stay busy because I thought that was part of my job. And so, you know, I remember about different moments. I remember when they were real young, when we lived at Lake Tahoe, I went and bought a snowmobile. And you were really young at that. I mean, you were just born there, so you were just a few months old, and Aaron was like 2.5, 3 years old. And we would go out on snowmobiles, and I'd come home sometimes in the afternoon, and I'd take Aaron out because you weren't old enough, but I'd strap him to me with a couple belts, and we'd go off into the snow, and those were good moments. But probably, honestly, when I think about the regrets I have, I think back to when you were in high school, and when you'd have sporting events. Now, when you had sporting events in town, I probably made them at 85, 90% of them. I tried to be there, but like when you traveled, I didn't go to those things. And I wish now that I had taken advantage of that, because I recognize now there's only so many games you were going to play and only so many times I could see that. And probably another thing that's a big regret of mine was that when you went off to college, because Pacific Union College was about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes away from where we lived. And the fact that we kind of sent you to college and then we picked up everything and moved, 12 hours to the north. In hindsight, I wish I hadn't done that. I think it would have been good to have been close by during those college years where we could have seen you more often and not had that kind of distance. So that part I really regret.
It's interesting that you, this just stuck out to me, that you felt it was your job to be busy when we were young. And I think that's something that's transferred over me to an extent where I feel like it's part of my responsibility. In order to be a good husband, I need to put work as a really high priority. And Casey and I have had Casey, my wife, and I have had conversations, especially when I was working for Pacific Union College, where I'd have lots of different events that I had to go be a part of that were they were work, but they weren't within normal work hours. And she had a little bit of trouble with me being like, oh, well, I need to go do this, when she was like, well, I wish you would just spend time with me instead, and you went to that last time, you can take a pass this time. But I always felt like it was my responsibility to be a good husband. I needed to be a good worker too. And that's not necessarily untrue, but I think that's part of something that I maybe got from you, that the tendency to put work a little bit first. But
it's actually your grandmother and grandfather's fault. That's who I got them from. So I will tell you one other thing that, not a regret, but a thing that I was glad that we did when you guys were growing up, was that we developed some really good friendships with other families that had kids around your guys' ages, and I always felt good about that, because I wanted to create for you and your brother what I had growing up, which was sort of another family that felt like family, that if you needed to talk to somebody and didn't feel comfortable talking to me or your mom, because sometimes kids have those moments, to have somebody else that you felt really good about, and people who I trusted, I trusted spiritually, I trusted them relationally, and so I think back to our places in Colorado and in California, just those opportunities. So I was glad for those. Got anything else?
No, I think I'm.
All right, let's overdo. Thanks, Ben. That actually went better than I thought it was going to go. So I thought he was going to really hammer me there. So, hey, let me just walk you through some life lessons that I think, just from my own experience, and I think even from when Solomon says we ought to learn how to number each of our days. And they're simply this. If I could say anything to the majority of you, it would be to slow down. Because you will slow down at some place in your life, but it may be too late to slow down when you need to slow down. So slow down. Because we have a hard time finding time for all the importance in life. I mean, how many things have you put off and said, well, something important's come up? You know, we're always going to take this vacation and go here. Or we're always going to have fun and go do this. We're always going to make this together. We're always going to, spend time trying this together. But, so sometimes slowing down is a good thing. Because here's the truth that I learned way too late. Your work will never be finished. In fact, I want you to say that with me. My work will. And because it will never be finished, you need to find time in the midst of all the busyness, all the stuff you're doing, to take the time. To spend some time. I'm glad Ben didn't go down this road, but he could have told you all the times that he or his brother or them together came and said, hey, let's go play this, let's go do this together. And I would say, not right now, I'm just too busy. I got to get this stuff done, but later. Now, sometimes I got the later, but oftentimes it didn't happen. So slow down. Secondly, cherish the mundane sacred. Because that normalcy in life, I think it's mundane, that, every day kind of looks the same. If your kids are in school, you get them up, have to go in and wake them up again, get them down, get them breakfast right, get them in the car, hurry up, or get out the bus stop, hurry up, go off to school, they get home, did you do your homework? Really, did you do your homework? You kind of go through all that, time for dinner, time to, do this, do that, into bed. The mundanity of life can just overcome, and we forget, we don't treasure the sacredness of that. Because here's the truth. Moments equal memories, and you cannot create moments. In fact, the times when I plan to have moments are typically the time that it kind of falls flat in its face. Moments happen. You know when moments happen? In moments. They happen with your kids that way. They happen with your friends that way. They happen when your relationships that way. And the only way to have those moments, to create those memories, is to be there in those moments. So I want you to watch this video that'll kind of capture that. Again, make you parents feel really bad. Watch this.
If you could have dinner with anyone, living or dead, who would you choose?
Kylie Minogue.
Marilyn Monroe.
Oh God, I wouldn't have a clue.
I know, straight up. Paul Hogan.
Kim Kardashian.
No.
I'd like to have dinner with Justin Bieber.
What? He's not coming to my house.
I'd have Bob Hawke.
Dave Hughes.
Barry Humphries.
Jimi Hendrix.
People who have made a difference in the world, maybe Nelson Mandela at the dinner table.
I don't know what he's going to say, I'm scared.
If you could have dinner with anyone in the world, who would you choose?
Probably our whole family, like a whole extended family. Mum and Dad. Mum and Dad. Does it have to be a celebrity? Could it be family?
We love it. We talk about how school is. We ask Mum and Dad how their day was.
Family.
Yeah, Mum and Dad.
Family. Who would you almost like to have a dinner with? They just want to be with us while they're eating food, which is pretty cool.
They see us above everything. I'm gonna get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bit of a message in it for me.
Yes.
What are we having for dinner?
One of the most important things you can do for your kids is to be there during a meal. When you find out an awful lot of stuff. Last key lesson, savor the present. The present right now. Because those presents change all the time. And here's the incredible thing. God gives us incredible presents every day. And if we could learn to see our presents as presents, it would change how we look at things. You know, when your kid has just scattered that food around the kitchen, when you have one of those moments and you say, oh, this is one of those things that we'll laugh about later. But right now, no, you need to, at that moment, kind of laugh at it. To appreciate the present. Because the reality is there really is no time like the present. In fact, if you're sitting close to somebody that you know, or that you'd like to know, kind of put an arm around him, give him a little squeeze, right? Be in the present there. There we go, yeah. We might start some whole new relationships today. You just never know what's going to happen at New Hope. Let me wind it down by just telling you this. The reality is you will have regrets. You can't avoid it. You can't avoid it as a parent. You can't avoid it as a spouse. But while you can't avoid it, you need to try to minimize them. And you minimize them by being engaged in the moments, by being present in the present, but by slowing down, by willing to tap those brakes of a life that just is going to go by so quickly. Those weeks that'll fly by. And listen, if you're always too busy, you are too busy. And for some of you, that's what you came here for today. To be reminded that if you're too busy, you really are too busy. And all I can say, as for a father and as your friend, slow down. Don't be so busy. Because you will miss moments that you later will regret. And don't forget the end game. When Moses says, hey, this is what you ought to do, teach your kids. Teach them kind of all the time. His point there is not to sit them down every moment of their life and lecture them. That's not what he's talking about teaching there. Because we all recognize that the best way you teach your children something is by how you live, right? More lessons are caught than they are taught. And so when Moses says you ought to teach them all the time, that's what he means. And you only do that by being present in those moments. There's this question that Jesus asked, and I think it's good for us whether we're parents or not. But I think it applies especially in this parenting thing. When he says, what profit is there for you to gain the whole world and lose yourself in the process? What's the benefit of that, Jesus asked. What can you give in exchange for your life? And his point is, when he says that, is that there's something that we are given in exchange for life. And it's really the key question that Jesus comes out. And that's simply this, and you can ask it whether you're a parent or not. Is this worth giving my life for? That question alone can change your life. That question, and this is not necessarily a religious question, though Jesus covers it in that. The reality is, all of us are giving our lives for something. And every moment you're giving your life for something. And the fair question for all of us to ask, the important question for all of us to ask, is this worth giving my life for? And if it isn't, then we need to say, what do I need to do differently? But if you're a parent, there's another twist to that, and it's this. Listen, every week matters. Because every week is a week that's gone by. Not only a week you'll never get back, but also it can be a week that you'll always have with you forever. Because you don't know what's going to happen that week. You don't know the memories that you have, the experiences you're going to have, the stories that you can tell later. And what you do this week really matters. And if you're a parent, I want you to know that's true. That what you do this week matters. And don't just think it's a throwaway week. It's, getting a few more, couple of weeks here before school starts again. Thank you, Jesus. If you're kind of thinking that way, recognize that this week matters as much as those weeks. And if I could say anything to those of you that are parents, it would simply be this. Love your kids. Don't miss any opportunity to show them that love. And if you're the kind of parent that's always tempted to let words come out of your mouth that aren't very nice words, if you're glad to talk about how bad your kids are in front of them, if you're the kind of parent, like I was the kind of parent, that when they knocked over a glass of milk and I would yell at them, "What are you doing? What's the matter with you? What are you thinking?" Only to knock over my milk later. And to give them that eye to make sure they didn't ask me that same question back. There are very few kids that knock over their milk on purpose. There are very few of us as adults that knock over our stuff on purpose. And what if in the moment we could just laugh about it, we could just write it off, we could celebrate it? Because the truth is, if you're a parent, you are losing your child. We all lose our children. That's not a bad thing, by the way. But it's just at what point do we lose them? And I don't want you to lose them before it's time. So enjoy them these last few weeks of summer. Embarrass them when we leave here today. Give them a big hug and smooch, even if they're too old to be hugged and smooched. Because while they're embarrassed on the outside, there is something inside of them that appreciates that you love them.